or two. But at the desk with me to explain what lessons can be learned from Mark Shuttleworths' tax battle with the South African Reserve Bank is Andrew Wellsted from Norton Rose Fulbright. Good to have you with us today, sir.
Thank you.
Maybe if you can provide us with the latest update with regard to this case.
Well, the latest update is that, as most of the viewers are probably aware, the matter went through the courts and then it ended up at the Supreme Court of Appeal, and that decision is now being appealed to the Constitutional Court. So the matter is going to be heard at the highest court in the land now.
Tell us about that. What's on what basis?
Well, it's just a bit of background about the case. Some years ago, Mark Shuttleworth wanted to export some funds abroad, and there was a 10% export levy in place that he had to pay to get the funds offshore. He paid a portion of it under protest, but it was quite clear that he didn't agree with the levy. And what he did effectively was he challenged whether or not the export levy was competent, i.e. did he have to pay that export levy or not, was the law valid. The second thing he did, because this all fell under the remit of exchange controls, is he raised the point that in his view certain of the exchange controls are unconstitutional and should be struck down as not complying with the Constitution. What's very interesting about this case is in round one he lost on the levy, and the court heard some of his points about the constitutionality favourably. In the Supreme Court of Appeal, they overturned the point on the levy, so the Supreme Court of Appeal said he must be repaid the levy that he had paid, but they were not willing to listen to the constitutional points on the basis that he didn't have a vested interest in a lot of the issues that he had raised.
Maybe before you lose us in some of the technical terminology there, if we can understand the grounds of this discussion for it to go to the Constitutional Court. Is this an argument basically to find out whether the state can control if I can move my assets or not? The answer is no. It's not going to address all of the exchange control issues, but it is going to address whether the Constitutional Court will have to decide whether or not certain aspects of the exchange control regulation are constitutional or not, and whether or not they should be heard in cases such as this. So it goes broader than just the exchange control regulation. When can individuals bring a challenge to the constitutionality of a particular regulation? Must they have a very close vested interest, or can it be that they fall under the Constitution? What kind of precedent does it set?
It's going to, if you're a tax nerd and you're a lawyer like me, it's going to set a lot of very interesting precedents. There are a lot of issues up for grabs. Number one, the court that initially heard the matter was very willing to deal with the constitutionality aspect, and as I said, the Supreme Court of Appeal wasn't. So there's a very interesting constitutional debate as to, as I say, when should courts listen to claims by individuals that they are subject to unconstitutional laws. The second thing is, as you know, the commercial sector have been complaining about exchange control for a long time. It is seen as being an inhibitor of trade, particularly cross-border trade, and it's something that's been very unpopular for a long time. A lot of people will be watching with keen interest as to what the Constitutional Court think about the exchange control regulations.
From the murmurings that you've heard, maybe from the commercial sector, is this moving in the right direction with regard to fostering and cultivating a culture of entrepreneurship in South Africa and allowing for those free controls?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of supporters of Mr. Shuttleworth's position. The truth is that there's been a lot of discontent with the exchange control, or certain of the exchange control regulations, but not a lot of people have been willing to take them on. If you live in South Africa, you have to deal with exchange control. You take the attitude you'd rather work with it than against it. So I think there are a lot of people who believe that the stance that he's taken is a correct one and that it's a fight that should be fought. And as I say, people will be watching very closely as to how it's going to impact them, not only those that paid the levy. Remember, if you paid the levy as well, you're going to be watching with keen interest what the Constitutional Court say, because the Supreme Court of Appeal has said he gets his money back. There are a couple of technical hurdles as to whether or not everybody's entitled to their money back, but I can assure you that there are going to be some people that are claiming they want their levy back.
From the government's point of view, what does this mean then for their income-generating measures, like payment of the levies?
That's a good question. From the government's point of view, it's obviously an unwelcome challenge. Exchange control has been with us a long time, and I think that's part of the Supreme Court of Appeal's discomfort. To willy-nilly say, yes, on the face of it, that's unconstitutional and strike it down, can have far-reaching implications. So it's going to be very interesting how the Constitutional Court approach it. I think a lot of people think that a number of the aspects of the regulation that he challenged are unconstitutional, but there are policy considerations about the effects
of striking something down, and do you strike it down retrospectively? How are they going to deal with it? So for a lot of South Africans, it will have a significant impact on them.